Welcome to Sustainability Now, technologies and paradigms to shape a world that works. Designed for everyone interested in responsible stewardship of the planet, covering topics related to food, energy, housing, water, waste, health, economics, and consciousness. Welcome to your community, Sustainability Now, with your host, Scott Billy.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Sustainability Now. I'm Scott Billy. Today, I'll be your host, and I'm really excited to be joined by Bruce Dietzen, the creator of the Renew sports car, founder of Carbon Negative Fiber, and organizer of the Drawdown Hemp Project in response to the Musk Foundation's Carbon X Prize. Welcome aboard, Bruce.
Thank you, Scott. It's good to see you.
Oh, great. So let's get right into it. Can you tell everybody a little bit about the Renew sports car and how that whole project got started?
Right. Yeah. So in 2013, I decided to do what every middle-aged man does during a crisis is design his own sports car. And after having got it all ready to go and make a mold of it, I read the book, The Emperor Wears No Clothes by Jack Herrera, which is a favorite of mine. And there's a section in it that talked about Henry Ford making a car and using a lot of hemp to not only make the car, but also to fuel the car. And so that inspired me to make a modern day car using hemp because I did the calculations. And way back in 1941, it looks like Henry Ford, because he made a car which was about 50% of the material was made out of plant material, not just hemp, by the way. He used a bunch of stuff, including a lot of soybean, but he also fueled it with the an ethanol that he made from the scraps from his hemp fields. So it turned out that it actually had a lower lifetime carbon footprint than today's electric cars. So that convinced me. I've always been kind of into ecology and to see that that was done way back in 1941 and seeing where we are today, right, with the world on fire. My God, I'm glad I did that back in 2013, and so that was kind of the genesis, and that's what got me started into hemp and studying hemp further.
Cool. So your process for the car, you were focused mostly on the body panels, or were you doing everything out of hemp?
Well, yeah, it's the body panels are the primary thing. I don't know of anybody that's doing anything like chassis yet with hemp. Still, you need a stronger material, but I think we can possibly do it in the future. So I'm investigating that sort of thing as well. But also things like the upholstery, normal things that you could use, hemp fabrics for. Mm-hmm. Could not find things like carpeting made out of hemp. There's carpeting. Some carpeting has some backing from hemp, but couldn't find that. So just used hemp wherever I could, mm-hmm. and I ended up using a whole lot more hemp than Henry Ford did in his car. So.
Great. So can you describe that process a little bit? Like how exactly do you make a car out of hemp?
Well, I used a commercially available hemp fabric, 100% hemp fabric that would normally be used in clothing or something like that. Experimented with probably a dozen different weaves and it just replaced fiberglass. There's a lot of fiberglass that's used, say, in the kit car industry, right? And it can be hand laid up, or it can be put into a mold and then something called vacuum transfer molding, etc. But it's the same as using fiberglass or carbon fiber for making a body panel. Same sort of thing. It's a drop-in material. So it's just as simple as that, really. It wasn't all that terribly innovative.
So where do you see Renew going in the future? I know you've done some work building some prototype cars and working with the fiberglass solution. What do you envision as the path forward in that arena?
I'm not a wealthy guy. I'm not Elon Musk. If I were Elon Musk, I might say, damn the torpedoes. I'm going to be a full-scale car manufacturer. But I'm not. So it was. That's not to say that there won't ever be another Renew sports car. If somebody wants me to build one, they're very expensive to build, one at a time. Any car would be. But if somebody really wanted one, we could build it. Another aspect is if somebody wants to build another kind of car where there's a mold available. Give you an example. One gentleman contacted me a few weeks back, and he's been involved in making various different antique types of cars, and then making them, restoring them, and then making them electric powered. And so his latest venture is to create a Biden mobile, a 1967 Corvette Stingray that looks exactly like the one that Joe Biden got when he's in high school. Joe Biden still has one, and it still has that car. But they want to make an electric version of that. And of course, what better way to do that than make a hemp body? So if that project actually happens, then I'll be consulting on that. What I'm doing now is figuring out how to make even better hemp fabrics for industrial applications like this. This prototype like I have right here is going to the lab tomorrow, is an example of unidirectional hemp fiber. So it's even lighter and stronger than the stuff that I used to make my first car. And I think that's going to be well received in numerous different industries for making boats, car body panels, all sorts of sporting goods. Hemp is really great for making sporting goods. So biocomposites made out of hemp and bioepoxies is what I've been focusing on for the last year or so.
Cool.
And talking with several different companies around the world with bioepoxies. The technology there is changing dramatically. The amount of bio content that's going into these resins that hold it all together. So when you finish making these panels or something, you actually have somewhere in the neighborhood of about 95% biomaterial, right, which is socked away. It's taken out of the atmosphere, and it's right there in your boat or your car or whatever. Who knows what people are going to make out of this stuff.
So your focus is on a superior fabric that is more durable and less flexible than the woven fabric that's made for clothing right now, and you're working with partners on the bioepoxy front.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And we've got some other ideas going too in terms of structural hemp, which I can't really discuss, but I see that there's a way to do that would be not as cheap as steel, but I think it can be competitive. So we'll see where that goes, but no news on that yet.
All right. We'll have to stay tuned. And for folks that are interested in learning more about bioepoxies, we have an interview on sustainabilitynow.global with our friend Sean Steed from Change Climate. They're making bioepoxy out of the waste byproduct of the biodiesel industry. So adding to that circular economy mindset, one man's waste is another man's profit. So what can we do to work together?
Thank you for plugging Sean, because he's one of the guys that I'm talking with right now.
That's great. Yeah, I can't wait to see what you two do together. So for folks out there that don't know, fiberglass itself is used to make car bodies and boats and all kinds of things. And it's really kind of like a glass fabric almost. It's a sheet of bendable stuff that you put into the shape that you want, and then you're using some sort of resin to harden it into that shape so that it becomes sort of rock solid by the time it's done.
Yeah, and to give you an example of why we would want to replace fiberglass for these types of applications, very simply, for every pound of fiberglass that's produced, 8 pounds of CO2 is dumped in the atmosphere. because it requires massive amounts. It's literally little tiny strings, fibers of glass. And in order to make those things, they have to heat up the material, the glass, obviously, and then extrude that stuff. And what they have to heat it up with is typically fossil fuels, right? So we know we have to get rid of fossil fuels, and so having a material like this is really important, because not only does it avoid the emissions of CO2, but it's also sequestering CO2, because hemp is a carbon negative plant-based material. So that's why it's important to do something like this. And to give you a really wild example, carbon fiber, for every pound of carbon fiber that you use, you're dumping 20 pounds of CO2 into the atmosphere, because it requires even more fossil fuels. And as you and I know, and all of your audience knows, we have to stop using fossil fuels, not tomorrow, today, maybe even yesterday. They have to go. There's no more question. We need to start making everything we possibly can from hemp today.
Absolutely. You always hear these stats. It's 25,000 or 35,000 different things that can be made from hemp. It's just a matter of producing it, getting the processing facilities in place, and starting to make stuff out of it. And that's, we've done a lot of work with a lot of great groups like yours to help make sure that can happen. And like you say, everything we do to move towards plant-based is removing fossil fuel production lines from, heavy industries like spinning glass into fibers and turning carbon into fibers. Those are super intensive processes that are, you're not going to be able to carbon negify those.
That's right. Yeah. But, it's interesting that you bring that up, because there have been a couple of teams out there that have figured out how to make carbon fiber in a fashion that is close to carbon neutral, which a lot of people will probably go, wow, that's pretty cool. Because we've been pushing the whole idea of carbon fiber for years for lightweighting, to improve gas mileage, et cetera, and this sort of thing. And they've been kind of like hiding behind this whole thing. Well, yeah, we know it's one of the worst materials in the world to use, because it requires so much fossil fuels in order to create it. But it lightweights things, so we make it up by having better gas mileage, et cetera. So that mentality is starting to slip away. Now, a couple of entities out there have figured out how to. It's very expensive to do. How to make it without using a lot of fossil fuels, with using renewable energy. But guess what? It still doesn't do. It does not sequester CO2. So They can get it down to zero, but our whole society can't live on zero. If tomorrow we had absolutely no fossil fuels being burned, our temperature of the earth would continue to go up, as we well know, for decades to come. That we're in that kind of dire straits right now. So we can't just say, all right, we'll be carbon neutral. As a human society, we have to be carbon negative. We have no choice. We have to make carbon negative products. And hemp is is perhaps the best, most versatile plant on the planet for doing that.
Yep. It's fast growth cycle and, ability to be turned into long-term durable goods is sort of unsurpassed.
Yeah. And I might add something here as a note. Been studying a lot for this new organization that we're just putting together for Drawdown Hemp, but I've actually been studying the concept and the math behind going carbon negative since 2013. And what some folks don't quite understand yet is how hemp sequesters CO2. It's a really fundamentally basic thing here that it does. It can sequester CO2 into the soil, and it can sequester CO2 by making durable goods that last a long time and keep that CO2 out of the atmosphere. Right? If you burn a cannabis plant, it's just going to release its CO2 in the atmosphere. Right? If you chop down a tree and let it rot on the ground, it's going to release its CO2 in the atmosphere. You have to make this stuff out of a durable good. Mm-hmm. So there's soil sequestration, and Hemp isn't all that much different than corn. An acre of corn will sequester into the soil about a half a ton of CO2 into the soil. Doesn't sound like a whole lot, right? But it's important. If all plants were grown, if all crops were grown with no-till practices, regenerative practices, that would add up to a lot. If all your tomatoes and celery and your beets and garlic and everything were done with no-till, it would add up at only half a ton per acre. Well, hemp isn't all that different of a plant when it comes to its size of its root structure and this sort of thing than corn. So there hasn't been a finished study. I'm working with some guys that are going to do those studies this year on industrial hemp and come up with a finished number, a reliable number, but it's probably going to be less than 1 ton per acre, right? So where does the big opportunity to sequester CO2 come from with the hemp plant? It's from the stalk. It's from the stalk. You can make durable goods. The best example of that, hempcrete homes. It's the perfect example. I mean, all that hemp herd is made out of plant material. All plant material is 45% carbon once it's dried. All plant material. So if you can grow a crop that grows as fast as hemp, 4 times faster than trees, and turn it into a durable good, then you've got something going there. That's pretty cool. And what that turns out to be, right now, the average is less than 4 tons of hemp stalk. Now, that's just the bast and the herd, right? It's not the top of the plant. It's not the seeds. It's not the flowers. That stuff isn't necessarily amenable or usable for a durable good per se, although we may find more uses. So you're only looking at how much bast and then how much herd can come off of that acre of hemp, just those 2 measurements. So it's less, right now it's less than 4 tons per acre. And so if you take that and multiply it by a fairly well understood formula of around 1.5 tons being sequestered for every ton being used or turned into a durable good, then you have something around a little more than 5 tons of potential for turning an acre of hemp stalks into durable goods. Add to that the half ton that goes into the soil, and you've got roughly about 6 tons of CO2 potential to be sequestered by a hemp crop. And of course, those numbers are going to go up. Here in the United States and in Canada, we don't exactly have it completely dialed in. We don't know all the perfect cultivars that are going to grow in Minnesota versus Florida versus California or what have you for industrial hemp grown for fiber and seed. But we will. And so those numbers are probably going to go up a little bit. But right now, conservatively, I think you can bet on saying anywhere between 5.5 to 6 tons of CO2 can be sequestered from a hemp crop, an industrial hemp crop, 1 acre turned into durable goods.
That's pretty impressive. So the trick is you're using the plant to breathe in the CO2 and capture it all right there in the plant, and then turn the plant into something permanent so that we can make sure that CO2 stays sequestered. And
simple as that, and humans have been doing that sort of thing for thousands of years.
Yep, and there's no need to create crazy carbon sinks or storage facilities or injecting this stuff into deep underground wells or whatever some of the other proposals that have been out there. Just let the plants do their job and make stuff out of the plants.
Yeah, at this stage, we should have all hands on deck. If the big oil companies want to build these direct air capture facilities out there, have at it, guys. Do it. But the amount of money that they're going to have to spend in order to do that is just incredibly expensive. It's much more cost effective to grow a crop that can not only house you, clothe you, and feed you, and also address some of your medical issues, et cetera, and keep you healthy than it is to start than some of these other wild ideas about how we save the planet. The humans, for some reason, think we're so smart that we have to invent brand new technologies all the time in order to fix our problems. But this has always been there. It's always been there. And the only reason why we got away from making almost everything we could from plant materials, a couple hundred years ago, and other materials, but is because petroleum was so doggone cheap. It's just dirt cheap. And so is iron ore. So why not dig it all up and then use these giant furnaces to heat it up and this sort of stuff, and use that petroleum in order to make steel and aluminum and all this other stuff, which is great. You can't knock the fact that without minerals and fossil fuels, we wouldn't have had the industrial revolution that we've gone through, and changed things so much in the world. But unfortunately, there are externalities, and now the world's on fire, man. We're in trouble. We're in a lot of trouble. So again, we've got to stop burning all fossil fuels. We've got to go back to making everything possible from renewable resources. And hemp, it's number one. It's number one. Nothing touches it. Bamboo's close, but hemp is great.
Yep, no arguments there. So the whole Drawdown Hemp coalition that you're building is a direct response to the Musk Foundation's Carbon X Prize, right?
That's exactly right. That's exactly
Can you
right.
describe that whole competition and how it works and what they're trying to achieve?
Right. Well, okay. So there's already been this organization called X Prize, and they're incredible. They're incredible at promoting new innovations, new technologies, etc. And Elon Musk approached them. He wanted to throw some money at this problem we're talking about of saving the planet. And so the whole idea is, how do we remove CO2 out of the atmosphere? And so he's got this challenge, and he's putting up $100 million to find the best ways to do so. And the first prize is $50 million to that team, and I guess then they're gonna chop up the other $50 million to some of the runners up. But the whole idea is someone coming up, or some team coming up with a great solution on how to reduce the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. Now, the way we're approaching it, though, is not only how much CO2 can be sequestered, right, by building things out of durable goods from all the stuff I was just talking about, but also how CO2 can be avoided, because that's actually the bleeding artery right now. I mean, the severed artery that is so important that we address. If we don't stop burning fossil fuels as soon as possible, our planet is going to bleed out on us. It's that bleak. So we're kind of throwing an additional thing in here, and I'm hoping that the X Prize and Elon Musk will consider the fact that carbon avoidance is part of this program, and it just happens to be that hemp can do both. It can not only sequester the CO2, but it can replace fossil fuels in many instances. So just, as an example, concrete, right? Cement used for concrete. It's one of the largest emitters of CO2 in the world, because it requires massive amounts of fossil fuels in order to be burned, in order to make it. So what do we have from the hemp community? Got hempcrete. It's not the same. It's not necessarily as load bearing, nowhere close in terms of load bearing, etc. But if you start making your structures out of, cross-laminated timbers or engineered timbers, right? Or parallam beams made out of wood or bamboo, or maybe even hemp someday, right? And you use that to hold up the structure, and now you make the walls out of hempcrete. You can go all the way up to, I believe the latest figure that I've heard is 40 stories tall, might be higher. And they're making buildings that way, but without the hemp, in Vancouver. So it's really something that's totally possible right now. It could be that our homes and our apartments around the world will be made from a carbon negative material called hempcrete in the future, instead of using a lot of concrete blocks and slabs underneath homes, etc. So we can replace a whole lot of demand for concrete.
Hempcrete panels are the perfect substitute for those concrete panels that they're using in high-rise construction and strip malls and everything right now. The precast concrete panels, they're not structural either. So replacing them with a hempcrete panel is a no-brainer. You're not, there's no new engineering to do. You still got your steel structure holding up a building. You replace the concrete panels with hempcrete panels, and it's a net positive win right there.
Nice and thick with incredible R values that can potentially drop the heating and cooling energy requirements by up to 80%. I read somewhere that the building industry alone, just in the materials that they use, and then the amount of fossil fuels that are required for heating and cooling, are at least 40% of the problem of man-made greenhouse gases.
So what is the ultimate requirement of the Carbon X Prize? Like what does each team have to strive to achieve?
Yeah, great question. That what Elon Musk has put out there as a challenge is for each team, and I believe there's over 900 that are competing for this right now. Each team has to be able to show a sustainable way to be able to draw down at least a gigaton of CO2 per year, right? And that's a big number. Direct air captures, these direct air capture machines can pull down 1 million tons per year, and they're planning to make 100 of those. So that adds up to 100 million. And Elon Musk is saying, you got to have 10 times more than that. So hemp, I think, can do it if we take, but it can't do it just with one thing. It can't do it with just hempcrete. Hempcrete can be a good sized chunk. I think it could definitely outperform direct air capture machines by itself, right? But there are so many other things, to your point, that hemp can be used for. And if we take a look at those other things and we start to add them up, then I think we can get well over that 1 gigaton per year. But it's going to take the various different disciplines and the various different engineers, entrepreneurs, universities, etc., getting involved and putting forth their very specific quantifications about how their hemp-related products can help us reach that goal. So,
any one of them, the infrastructure required to produce enough hempcrete to pull a gigaton of carbon out of the air would be a long time from now before it actually existed.
Actually, from my rough numbers, now we're building a team so that each different type of hemp product will have somebody from that specific area, right? So we'd have somebody from hemp blocks, like Glenn from France. He's doing the hemp block side of it. So each one is responsible for doing the same quantification methodology, and we're trying to borrow from the wisdom of Project Drawdown, which was started in 2014, and it became a bestseller, a New York Times bestseller, and it had 83 of the best ways to draw down CO2 out of the atmosphere. So if you were wondering where it came up with the name Drawdown Hemp, it's from Project Drawdown in reverence to what those guys did. So what we'll have is a same sort of thing, maybe 20 different hemp products. I'm guessing. We'll see what it turns out. All using the same quantification methods, and with one team cross-checking and doing peer reviews of the other team, et cetera, to make sure that we've got no BS. We don't want any BS in this thing. It's going to be reviewed by Elon Musk, and he's got some pretty sharp people X Prize has some pretty sharp people. They're going to take a look at it. So for a long time, there's been a lot of folks that run around in the hemp industry, throwing numbers just everywhere. But you ask them to quantify it, and they kind of, I think I heard it somewhere. But so it's very important for us to make sure it's very well quantified. But I'll just give you another example, right, of some potentials, right? Hemp biofuel. That's an obvious one. That whether it's hemp diesel, or if it's hemp ethanol, or even carbon negative hemp gasoline, which is possible. It's that technology wasn't created using hemp per se, but the same sort of thing is possible. And obviously, there's for every X percent of gasoline that we replace or diesel we replace, the number's going to add up really, really high. Here's another one. Right now, if you take a look at all of the greenhouse gas emissions from raising cattle for beef, right? From what I understand, we need to research this a little bit closer. I don't have in-depth confirmation of these numbers, but it's enough to make me really want to pursue this and get part of the team looking at this. If you add all those numbers up, it comes out to something like 1.5 gigatons of CO2 equivalent. It's methane, but if you break it down into the CO2 equivalent, 1.5 gigatons of CO2 equivalent per year.
In the cattle production.
In cattle, yeah, just in raising beef. That's a lot of methane burps. Mm-hmm. Now, if you replace that with hemp seed, wow. Right. I'm not saying that we can do it all, but we have to take a look at all these numbers and then add up. We take a look at the total market for all of these things that are out there and that are adding CO2 to the atmosphere or methane or nitrous oxide, whatever type of GHG it is. And we add them all up. And then we have to go back and say, okay, but what's realistic? What can we really, really do? Right? Can we really force everybody to give up beef 100%? Can we really force everybody in the world to make all of their homes out of hempcrete? I don't know.
Right. And I think one of the cool things I like about the X Prize in general and all the different competitions that they've run is it's just an innovation factory, and it's a way to push that carrot out there, and in the hopes that a lot of teams of smart people are going to get together and compete to win the big prize. But in the the sort of byproduct is a lot of great innovation. And I think one of the byproducts coming out of this effort that you're doing right now is that standardization of what you can declare as an acre of hemp sequestration. And it just, in terms of carbon credits, help the farmers and manufacturers of hemp products by getting access to carbon credits with standardized numbers, so you don't have to jump through hoops every time you're trying to declare what have you done to sequester carbon in your efforts to grow and or make things out of hemp.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And that's why I brought up and went into my diatribe about really quantifying the CO2 sequestration capabilities of hemp. It's something I have to say during every time I'm interviewed. So it's pretty important. We got to agree on something. And if my numbers don't pan out, et cetera, and somebody's says you're crazy, please call me, because I'd love to talk about that, and because it's important. I don't want to just sit up here and say I know everything, because I clearly do not.
Right. And as more and more countries are implementing and or raising their carbon taxes, big polluters are bending over backwards to find ways to buy into carbon credits. So it's going to be a net positive for everybody in the hemp industry in the grand scheme of things as well.
Well, and that's where I think I have some hope here. I have a lot of hope generally, but I have even more thinking about, say you're a major corporation that dumps a lot of CO2 in the atmosphere. What you've been doing for the last couple of years, since the people are getting really concerned is you've been buying carbon credits, right? And that makes you feel a little bit better and this sort of thing. And you're getting those offsets, so you look greener. Mm-hmm. But what I think is going to really happen, Scott, that is really exciting, is the big entities that are dumping a whole lot of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere are going to start taking a look at their business models. So they're going to have to figure out how to provide products to the market that are made out of hemp that are carbon negative, and that's the way they're going to offset the regular products that they have been selling. Go back to cement as an example, right? If you're a giant cement manufacturer and some young upstart comes up to the CEO, he's new hire and he's 22 years old, and he says, Mr. CEO of the cement company, why don't we make a division that manufactures hempcrete blocks or hempcrete panels or this and this. That's the way to offset, right? Mm-hmm. And then as you see, over time, that 22-year-old becomes the CEO in 20 years because he saw the light. Right. He saw the opportunity of where the company has to go. Again, if you're burning a lot of fossil fuels right now as a major corporation, you owe it to the world to look at hemp and start thinking about the future of your company. Where is it going to go? Are you going to go down the drain because you're stubborn and you just think, oh, I'll just buy all these carbon credits and that'll make me feel better, etc. But that's not really the way to do things. That's okay. It's all right. But the way to really do things, the way to do things is to make carbon negative products. Mm-hmm. And if you're one of these, if you're a steel company, if you're cement, if you're a plastics company, if you're a company that makes leather, you could go textiles, right? I mean, huge textiles are supposedly responsible for 6.7% of all man-made greenhouse gases. Well, we all know that we can make much greener textiles and use much cleaner processes that are currently being used. The amount of water that's contaminated and used for making cotton textiles and the fertilizers and the chemicals are just unbelievable. And the technology is known how to make much greener textiles. And the way to do that is with hemp, because it's going to require a whole lot less water and a whole lot less pesticides, etc. It's just the way to go. So if you're in any of these any business that dumps a lot of CO2 in the atmosphere, and there's a whole lot of them, you need to be taking a look at hemp as an alternative. So right now, Drawdown Hemp is a small band of visionary thinkers that are trying to figure out who it is that we're going to want to bring onto the team. Obviously, anybody that's making stuff out of hemp already, especially if it's something that could be scaled and become big, like hempcrete, right? Then those folks are candidates. But we also want to have them also reach out to some of the companies that are making highly carbon intensive materials and say, I'll show you how to make this stuff and you can buy me out or something, because that's where that's where it's going to ultimately go. There's going to be a lot of entrepreneurs that stay in the space and do a lot of things. But then again, the big corporations will eventually come in here and say, yeah, we really have been kind of irresponsible. Maybe we should do things the right way for a change. So we'll see how it all plays out over time.
So how can people get involved in your Drawdown Hemp project?
Well, our website just went live a couple of hours ago, interestingly enough. It's all brand new. We just had our first team meeting on Saturday. So you're getting the latest scoop here. But the website that will probably be much more enhanced in the coming weeks, it can be found at drawdownhemp.org.
Great.
And let me tell you where I think this is all going to go. right? There's been some incubators that have been launched, many incubators that have been successfully launched, many different small companies and creative entrepreneurs, etc., for decades now. But Drawdown Hemp could turn into a hemp incubator if we win, some of this prize money. I'm saying we'll probably be a not-for-profit organization, and if we do win some of these prize monies, I could see it going towards promising new innovative ideas on how to use the hemp plant. I think that would be cool. We haven't totally decided how we're going to do that, but that's kind of what I'm thinking. But one of the nice things about the folks that are starting to join the Drawdown Hemp team is whether or not we win the first prize for $50 million isn't necessarily the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to get the visibility and the market demand going for hemp-based products. It's been too long coming. Too many people have been waiting, just making T-shirts and pocketbooks or what have you, and now the innovation that's going on is just incredible. So if we can help to continue to feed that innovation, look out. Hemp is going to go where people like you and I and a lot of your audience have wanted to see it go for a long time. So we're hoping this
technology is there. It's a matter of scale. Now it's time to go to scale.
Yeah, and it would be great to have maybe an incubator that can help that happen too.
I like it. So funding the R&D on promising new ways to to push the boundaries of what's possible with hemp.
Yeah. So and building that infrastructure, right, that you're talking about, that's another thing that we're looking to add to the team as well. That expertise of hardware manufacturers, processor manufacturers, because that's key. We want them to be part and parcel to this whole thing. When you do these analyses, like Project Drawdown did, right? They came and said, well, this is how much CO2 we think we can sequester. This is how much we think we can avoid. But then now we have to take a look at what it's going to cost to do that. Mm-hmm. So that was all part of the structure of Project Drawdown. And then at the end, they basically described for each one of those measures what the green premium would be in order to do these things. So if it's going to cost us, 15% more to make it out of hemp, or if there has to be some certain amount of infrastructure that has to be financed ahead of time as part of a heaven forbid, but would think that the governments around the world would decide to actually saving the planet their number one priority. Oh my goodness. Maybe we should spend a lot of money and finance, as the World Bank or what have you, give negative interest rates to buy decorticating machines and right. tractors or what have you. So, but literally we need to have those things identified and quantified so that when something like this, I'm hoping and that this is going to happen, that even if we don't win, we'll get enough visibility from this project to be able to reach the Joe Bidens of the world, right, and the prime ministers of the world, to take a look and go like, this makes sense. We got to use this hemp thing. We got to grow it everywhere.
If you're going to grow enough acres of hemp to get to a gigaton of carbon removal at 6 tons an acre, that's a lot of acres. And then once you grow it, you got to do something with it. So that's a lot of decorticators and a lot of manufacturing. So if you look at an infrastructure plan, just the production of the machinery to make it happen is a jobs creator. And then the ongoing usage of it is jobs forever.
Absolutely. And here's another really kind of interesting nuance to doing something like this. Um, as you know, it's really expensive to transport lightweight material like hemp stalks, right? In general, it's a good idea when you're growing crops to process them within 50 miles or maybe 100, 200 miles tops, because it's just too expensive to move things around. And hemp's very light, so it's very voluminous. So you need just massive amounts of transportation to move massive amounts of hemp.
Not to mention the kind of fuel it would take putting the carbon back into the air that you just worked so hard to sequester.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what that means is wherever these products are made is going to be close to where hemp is grown. Now, do we have enough space? I just finished doing a quick analysis that I'm sending over to the NHA because they're doing a proposal to the Biden administration, but an analysis of what it would take to replace the bodies on 1 million trucks from steel to hemp. And it's pretty interesting because hemp is lighter than aluminum. So Ford actually switched their trucks over to their truck bodies to aluminum 6 years ago, and hemp is even lighter. I know I've made body panels with cars. So, but what it turned out to be is that for every truck, it would basically bring down the lifetime carbon footprint of a truck. Both the sequestration and the avoidance number added together comes to about 1 metric ton per truck, which really adds up. Now, in order to do that, you need a lot. I don't have the number here right in front of me, but you need a lot of hemp bast fiber to do that, right? So where are you going to grow it? You're probably going to grow it in someplace like Michigan, close to Detroit. And so the calculation for how much that would take is about 1.25% of the croplands in Michigan. Not that much.
Right.
But on the other hand, in other places, right, you've got this opportunity to distribute the wealth and to feed the masses that are starving to death around the world. Mm-hmm. You've got rainforests that are being burned down, 1 or 2 acres at a time, just by local, poor people that are going to raise a couple of chickens and maybe plant a couple of vegetables for a sustainable life. They're not getting rich off of it. That's one of the reasons for deforestation. Another is lumbering, right? Cutting down hardwood trees. Well, you don't need to do that if you're making everything from hemp. Another one is for palm oil. Well, can we replace a lot of the palm oil with hemp? Yeah, a lot of it. Not all of it, but and mining. So that's the beauty of hemp. We could grow hemp in these same spaces and then start manufacturing our goods and our homes, etc., with the hemp right there locally, and it'll feed people. It's the most nutritious, one of the most nutritious sources of protein in the world, as you well know. So, I mean, it's just a beautiful plant. It's a beautiful opportunity. We can start to grow it to feed everyone around the world. It's more versatile than bamboo. It grows in a lot more places than bamboo. Bamboo is very versatile, but hemp is more so. To feed everybody, to house everybody, and industries can start to move all over the world. They won't be tied to resources like softwoods that come down from Canada to Detroit, or iron ore that comes from Iron Mountain, Michigan. That's one of the reasons why Detroit is Detroit. I mean, it was using these types of resources that were close at hand. But now be able to manufacture just about just all sorts of stuff out of hemp and do it anywhere we want around the world. Individual countries can now have their own, can start to build their own economies, can start to feed their own people. They can change the future of their countries. They don't have to burn down rainforests, etc. They can They can take those lands that have already been deforested and start to cultivate hemp. Maybe not on the big high slopes, right? That's where trees are required, because trees are good for reforestation. But if you're going to grow something, you probably going to want to grow hemp instead of just planting trees, because it produces 4 times more biomass.
It is a perfect solution to replenish the areas that have been clear cut already, because it turns into usable crop in a year, as opposed to waiting 15 to 20 for a tree to grow. And as you're talking about, you can use those products locally and help the people in the areas, instead of growing a tree, cutting it down and shipping it somewhere else in the world for them to use it, and only making, pennies on the potential dollar of, the maximum you could make if you are actually to produce final products locally, as opposed to just sending the resources off somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And right now, hemp fiber is still pretty expensive, but that's only because the market hasn't been developed.
Yep. And the processing is still pretty rare.
And if we do our job here at Drawdown Hemp, we'll get that visibility. We want to make it clear to the governments of the world that the way to save the planet is to make everything possible from hemp. Can I say that again? The way to save the planet is to make everything possible from hemp.
Well, thanks a lot, Bruce. It's been great having you here, and can't wait to see how things progress moving forward. And if anybody is interested, we'll have all of our links and resources available on sustainabilitynow.global. Feel free to pop over there and check out our show notes page. And like we always say, working together, we can shape a world that works.
I think you're right, Scott. Good to see you, my friend.
Thanks, Bruce.
Thank you for listening to Sustainability Now. Visit sustainabilitynow.global to find resources related to today's program. While you're there, pledge your support by making a contribution to help us shape a world that works. And remember to subscribe, share, and follow us on social media.